Welcome to this Astranti SCS highlights video. If you're preparing for your strategic case study exam, then this is the perfect video for you. You might be wondering what you need to do between now and the exam date. Well, the best place to start is by gaining a thorough understanding of the pre-scene company. And in this video, we'll be showing you some of the highlights from the Astranti pre-scene analysis pack. And these highlights will give you a good overview of the pre-scene company and should serve as a solid basis for your preparation over the next few weeks. So in this video, we'll be showing you clips from 5 different videos from our pre-scene analysis pack. And the first clip is from the pre-scene analysis series. It's vital that you fully analyze your pre-scene, and this requires a detailed examination of the case study, ensuring that every section is fully understood. So our pre-scene analysis video provides a page-by-page analysis of every section of the pre-scene, and it ensures you don't miss anything important, and it helps you to build a comprehensive understanding of the material. And this is vital if you're going to gain high marks in the exam. So in this clip, we've taken a section from our pre-scene analysis video series.
So let's take a look then at the introduction. Now, one thing that I would say when you are looking at this and initially reading that, oh, it's a company that creates solutions for objects primarily in warehouses and factories, and it's all automated and robots, etc. Please don't suddenly think, oh, I need to become an expert in robots. Now, I'm not saying that any research that you do isn't going to be valid, but what I would say is that CIMA is expecting you to be able to be a senior manager in Robobryce's finance function. That's the role that you are playing. You are not the CIMA student, you are a senior manager in Robobryce's finance function. What that does mean, though, is that you do not need to be a robotics engineer. You don't need to go into a huge amount of detail of how robots work and all these sorts of things, because the accountants at actual robotics firms won't be experts in robots. They are experts in accountancy, and they do accountancy for that, but they are not robotics engineers. So please don't panic and suddenly think that this is going to be a super complicated one where you're going to need to know how robots work and everything like that. You won't need to. You just need to be the senior manager in the finance function. So the company is quoted. That, of course, means that it trades on the stock exchange. And that can be a very useful tool for an organization because it can help it to acquire funding, either by raising additional equity funding or by leveraging debt against the value of the company. But it also is very useful from a general strength perspective. When you think about the exposure of the company, the prestige of the company, it's a large quoted company. People automatically think of a company that's big and on the stock exchange as one where they want to work at. They think there's security there. They think it's going to be lucrative to work there. So there are benefits to being a quoted company, but of course it does mean that you need to prepare additional financial statements, and your finances will be under additional scrutiny versus a private company, because of course it will need to be audited by a public auditor. And just another additional point there, I've already mentioned about the being listed helps with funding, helps with prestige, perhaps with staffing, also with customers as well. If you are a customer and you own a warehouse and you're about to spend millions and millions on automating your warehouse, you perhaps are going to feel better and more confident going with the large quoted company that's been doing it for years than a startup that you don't know if they're even going to survive as long as the project is going to take to complete. So that also is a useful thing when it comes to attracting customers, when it comes to customers' belief, customers' faith in you as an organization. And they create solutions for handling objects primarily in warehouses and factories. So you're thinking about pallets. You're thinking about moving pallets from one part of a warehouse to another. You think about moving parts, whether it could be parts of a car, parts of an aircraft, etc., from one location to another. And this idea here about creating solutions, that already you're thinking about the purpose of the organization, the values of the organization, the mission of the organization, what drives the company, creating solutions. And that will feed into its makeup, that will feed into its culture, that will feed into the required attitude of people that work at the organization. And again, when you're thinking about anything that you might suggest, any strategies that you suggest, any projects, etc., everything needs to be about creating solutions. That's why the organization exists. So that is forming part of your guiding principles there, is creating solutions, being innovative. Something that is going backwards, something that is regressing, something that is not about creating solutions for handling objects in warehouses and factories might not be suitable for the organization. It then goes on to say that Robobryce assists its clients by developing and installing the systems required to store and retrieve inventory. So it doesn't just design them, it also installs them as well. So you're looking at a business that's going to have a lot of client-side interaction, where you're going to be in their warehouse installing it, meeting their specific needs rather than just having a one-size-fits-all boilerplate approach to it. So what that means is your clients, your customers are likely to be quite large, quite powerful organizations. You're not going to be selling multi-million pounds, multi-million $T equipment to small businesses that operate out of a small unit, for example. Now, there may be smaller things that you can do for them, but it's likely they're going to be quite large, powerful clients. So, of course, what we should already be thinking about then is the clients, the employees of those clients, if we're going to be working on site, the shareholders of those clients, the customers of those clients. All of those are going to ultimately be people that are impacted by our operations. So we're thinking about our stakeholders. And we need to think about our stakeholders as we go through the pre-scene, because, of course, thinking about how anything that you suggest, strategies, projects, etc., is going to impact your stakeholders is what senior managers do. And added into that would, of course, be our own employees, ensuring that they are satisfied, ensuring that they are well compensated, ensuring that they are well trained, because that's, of course, going to be very, very important. If we're working in the robotics industry, we need to have a decent supply of staff that are experienced, staff that are knowledgeable, staff that are trained. Because, of course, this is not just a job that anyone can do. It's going to have people with a certain level of intellect, certain level of engineering, certain level of robotic expertise, etc. And, of course, our own suppliers, our own shareholders as well. Those are also people that are going to be impacted by our operations. Particularly as a listed company, we are going to have shareholders. And it just gives us an example there that Robobryce might support an online retailer by supplying a system that can pick goods from storage in response to customer orders. So, for example, you're online, you order a book, and then that sends a message to the IT system, cyber system that they'll have. That then sends a signal to a robot, for example, that might then go automatically to the location where that specific book is stored, pick that book up, bring it back to a packaging area, and an automated packaging process identifies that that book is going to this person at this address. It automatically boxes it up, puts the label on, and loads it onto a truck that then goes to the relevant location, the relevant supplier depot, for it to be then shipped out to you. Now, you are a senior manager, and again, I'll just reiterate that point. You are not the CIMA student. You are the senior manager working in Robobryce's finance function. So again, this goes back to the preamble provided by CIMA, which I'm sure you've read, about your role, your responsibilities. And one of your responsibilities is to report to the board, is to advise the board on special projects and strategic matters. So when you think about your E2, your E3 knowledge here, the key point there is influencing, being able to recommend and suggest to the board with valid justification, valid steps to take the project forward or to take your suggestion forward to the board to influence them. Now, within that, you need to provide recommendations. You need to provide an assessment of risk and finance as well. They are not separate at the strategic case study level. You can't just suggest the company does something without considering the risks of it, without considering how it's going to be funded, how it's going to be financed. So these are all, again, key elements that you need to bring in, you need to factor into your analysis when you are answering questions in the exam. And again, just a note there to make sure you include recommendations. Make sure you conclude your answers as well, because that is going to be important. That's going to be what sets you apart from perhaps some of the other students, is that you are truly taking on board that role of a senior manager and providing suggestions with justifications. Because that's very important to do, and you should always do that. Even if you are not directly asked to do that, you must include that, because again, that's what a senior manager would do. I always use the example of if you in your actual job were given a task by the board of directors or the partners of the company that you work for, would you go into that meeting where you are delivering your results? Would you go into that with a nice detailed presentation, with an executive summary and all these things? Or would you just go in with a load of information and just say to them, well, here's all of this, make something of it? Now, I'm hoping that it will be the former. And that's exactly what you need to do, exactly how you need to think about it in this particular exam.
Next up, we've got a clip from our strategic analysis. It's extremely important that you have the ability to identify how the pre-scene relates to key models and theory from E3, F3, and P3. And the examiners will expect students to demonstrate a good understanding of the models and theories and make the appropriate links to the case study during the exam. It can be hard to fully analyze a company using models you've only recently learned and be confident that you've got it right. So our strategic analysis has done that hard work for you. So in this clip, we're going to take a look at our strategic analysis video.
So we know what the organization wants to achieve. We know it wants to improve society. We know it wants to innovate. We know it wants to improve efficiency for its clients. But how are we going to monitor that progress? How are we going to monitor our business to be successful? Well, balanced scorecard, a great way to do that. And the great thing about that balanced scorecard is that it doesn't just focus on the finances. It doesn't just focus on performance, etc. It focuses on a range of different metrics. Now, the downside to this is it can lead to, in a sense, lack of focus from management if they've got too many things to focus on. So I'm not going to come up with a list of 100 different things for finance, 100 different things for learning, etc. But what we can do is pick out a few key things that they could focus on, that they could monitor, they could measure, and give an indication of whether they're improving their overall performance. So, for example, with finance, it's very straightforward, things like profit. Profit is the easiest thing to say. Are we improving as an organization? Has our profit gone up from last year? So that's something to monitor, of course. Now, two things that are really important for this industry, given the size of the projects, is the cash flow and the return on investment. It costs a lot of money to upgrade a warehouse, to kit out a warehouse with all these different conveyor belts and warehouse management systems and the robotics around it, etc. And the project could last for months, if not years. So cash flow is a key issue here because salaries need to be paid. But if we have got a huge project that's lasting many months, many years, it perhaps isn't going to give us that cash flow until it's completed. And the return on investment for our own investment is important, but also for our customers, for our clients. Yes, in the short term, we might expect a project to actually lose money because if you're spending millions updating and upgrading a warehouse, it's not going to immediately pay for itself as soon as it's completed. But over a length of period, a length of time, it will. When we think about the learning perspective, the company wants to be innovative. It wants to be at the forefront of technology, the forefront of growth. So the number of new innovations that it designs, the number of new products it designs, the number of new services that it offers, the number of markets that it enters as well. We know that it is a global company. We know that it deals with companies both as a buyer and a seller in many different markets. So adding new markets to that roster is going to diversify the risk, but also is going to improve the size of the business and allow them to bring new innovations to new markets. A number of new technologies implemented. That specifically was mentioned in the values of the company, is the forefront of implementing technology. So if you say that that's what you want to be about, that's what you say you value, then you need to monitor that. If you're not implementing, if we've gone through the last 5 years and we've not implemented any new technologies, then how can we claim that that's something that we value? So it's important to make a note of that as well. From an internal perspective, there's more to do with your operations. So are you making effective use of the assets in your factories? It mentioned that we have robotics in our factories as well as producing robots. We are also using robots to help produce our robots. So robots producing robots. I'm sure that's what Terminator was all about. So whether that's going to lead to the end of days, who knows? So, but utilizing those assets and utilizing your staff as well, very, very important, both from our perspective, but also what we can give to our clients. Now, that's not necessarily internal, that's more to the customer perspective, but making sure there is a reduction in wastage, a reduction in downtime. So budgets and sticking to budgets would be an important aspect here, as well as job completion rates. So for example, if we've got a job to kit out a new warehouse for a new supermarket, we've got an 8-month timeline for installing that. Do we finish it on time? Do we finish it to budget? If we've gone over budget, if we've gone over time, then perhaps we haven't done that successfully, and that's not going to help necessarily with the relationship with the client if they needed it to be done on time. Employee satisfaction, very important, helps with staff retention. The pre-scene specifically mentioned about the importance of keeping an experienced workforce. So monitoring that is very important. And also the safety record quality of the services provided as well. If we've got robots going around warehouses and they are not made to the right level of standard, the right level of quality, that could lead to accidents, that could lead to a reduction in our safety record, which of course is not what we want to do. And then finally, the customer perspective. How satisfied are our customers? How satisfied are our stakeholders, our external stakeholders in general? Because by the mission statement suggesting that society ultimately is in some form our client, because that's why we exist, to improve society. So stakeholder satisfaction, the number of clients that we have, the number of repeat clients is very important. If a big supermarket pays us X amount of money to fit a new warehouse, and then 5 years later that supermarket's grown even more and they want new warehouses built, but they don't come back to us, then that's a problem. Whereas if they do come back to us for repeat business, that's very beneficial. Of course, there's always the saying that a new client costs 20 times as much as an existing client. The better relationship you have to clients, satisfied clients are, repeat business pays for itself.
We're casting the net a little bit wider now with a look at the wider industry in which the pre-scene company operates with our industry analysis video. It is critical to demonstrate to the examiner that you have fully understood the pre-scene industry as a key element to gaining extra high marks in your case study exam. Researching the industry can be a laborious process, especially when you're not sure which information is useful and which isn't. And our team has spent hours doing this research for you, finding the information that will help you to achieve a wider perspective of the industry and build a deeper knowledge in preparation for your exam. So in this next clip, we'll be taking a look at our industry analysis video. Okay, so we skipped a few pages ahead and we're in the first chapter here looking at the history of the industry. Now, the history does date back to ancient Egypt, often as these things do, but obviously the major developments have really happened in the last 50 to 70 years. And it's after World War II that we see the things like forklifts and wooden pallets coming into the fold. And that makes basically what was being done before, individual inventory management, That's now obsolete in favor of tracking inventory by pallet numbers on a much larger scale. And then in the 1950s, you had new technological developments in the form of barcode technology that allowed for easier tracking of these pallets. And throughout the 50s and 60s and onwards, we saw more technological developments. Computers became more prevalent, and we saw new technology in the form of automated storage and retrieval systems, AR/AS. And then as we move on into the late 20th century, again with technological changes, and as we'll see throughout this, technological change has been a really major driving factor in this industry in the last few years. In the late 20th century, we've moved towards something called warehouse management systems, and these are based on computer technology, and it's the computerization and digitization of warehouse management. And you have new technology being introduced all the time to automate, to some extent, things like inventory control, picking orders, tracking orders and inventory, and ultimately all of this contributing to making warehouse management more efficient. We've got new technology in the form of radio frequency identification, RFID. That's an acronym that you'll see referenced and probably have seen referenced in the pre-scene as well. More advanced barcode systems and increased automation. Not just automation, automation in the form of equipment. So things like conveyors and carousels, again, all making the movement of goods more optimized and efficient. And moving forward to more modern times, to the 21st century, we have seen rapid transformation in the industry, particularly driven by increased automation and the technology behind increases in automation. We have things like automated guided vehicles, AGVs, conveyor systems, robotic order pickers, and these are all standard practice in warehouse management systems. We've also got cloud-based warehouse management solutions and data analytics becoming more prevalent, and these things improve real-time visibility, demand forecasting, and overall supply chain efficiency. So all of this relating to making things more efficient in the movement of goods around and the storage and movement of goods in warehouses. Today, warehouse management systems accounts for up to 80% of warehouse operations. So by far the majority of it is done with this increased automation and robots and conveyors systems and all these sorts of things. And even newer technologies are on the horizon. We're adopting advanced technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the Internet of Things, all of these contributing to optimizing operations, ultimately making the management of warehouses more efficient, and in terms of money, more efficient means less costly. Obviously, these technologies cost money to invest in. Research and development, as we'll see later, is a really important integral part of this industry, but all of this optimization leads to more efficient operations that ultimately bring down the cost of managing warehouses. And from the perspective of a company like Robobryce, obviously what they're offering to their customers is warehouse management solutions and also products. So what we want to be able to offer to our customers is that greater warehouse operation efficiency that enables them to bring down their operating costs. Okay, in the final section of the video, we're going to take a look at a couple of specific industry examples. Now, in the industry pack at large, there are 25 of these, so I'm just going to look at 3, but it's worth looking through the whole lot because they are on a range of basically everything we've looked at so far. We've tried to find industry examples for, and these are the specific things that you can read and try to learn these and use them in the exam on relevant issues. So the first one to look at is Dragos CEO warns of further cyber attacks. So what's happened here? The CEO of Dragos, which is an incident response firm, has warned that cyber attacks could become more common due to automation. And they said, I think this is a hallmark of what is to come, that hyperconnectivity And scalability of automation is what's allowing ransomware authors to do what they're doing. Speaking at the RSA conference, he commented that many businesses cannot function without automated systems, and this makes them a vulnerable target for ransomware hackers. So what makes this relevant for you and what makes it relevant to the pre-scene? Obviously, Robobryce supply automated warehouses. Cybersecurity is also listed among the company's principal risks in the pre-scene. So if you do get a question on cybersecurity or something relating to risk, or maybe even more broadly technology, this might be your chance to bring up this particular industry example. So you might say something like, we should prioritize cybersecurity, as mentioned in the principal risks, because the robots manage and transport valuable inventory, and a cyber attack could disrupt operations or enable unauthorized access to sensitive data. And then this is where you'd bring in the real world element. The CEO of Dragos, an incident response firm, recently commented on the increased threat of ransomware hackers as a result of increased automation. And so to mitigate this risk, firms can implement robust encryption protocols, regularly update software to patch vulnerabilities, etc. So here's how you can utilize this industry information. It has to be related to a particular point, but if cybersecurity comes up, then there's a perfect opportunity for you to drop that little bit of knowledge in there to show the examiner that you have wider industry knowledge. The next clip is taken from one of our most popular videos, the top 10 issues. The top 10 issues video identifies the 10 most likely issues to appear in the exam based on our expertise and experience in this area. And our SCS expert gives guidance on how to deal with the issues in your answers, provides advice on which models to use, and key points that you should raise. Based on our experience of analysing CIMA case studies for over 10 years, our predictions have been extremely accurate in previous exams, with around 70 to 80% of topics in the real exams being covered in our top 10 lists. So take a look now at this clip from our top 10 issues video.
So now that we have looked at the reason why we've chosen these top 10 issues and how you can use these top 10 issues to prepare, let's start with the issues themselves, starting at number 10, which is funding. Now, the reason why I have chosen funding, and you can probably guess because I've already alluded to it in the preamble there, talking about funding as a potential issue, is that it is a huge key F3 topic. And it links to things such as debt and equity, it links to cost of capital, it's very, very commonly examined, and it's usually used as part of other questions. So it's sort of one of these questions I mentioned about things that link with others. Funding is one that links with everything. If you're going to have a new large investment project, cash is going to be needed for that. If you're going to open a new warehouse, cash will be needed for that. If you're going to go through a period of negative cash flows, extra cash might be needed to support that. So it links as an add-on issue with most topics that are anything to do with investing money. And it comes up time and time again in that context. Very commonly examined, one of the most commonly examined questions, or at least most commonly examined add-on issues to questions. And it was specifically mentioned as a key role by CIMA in the preamble to the guide to being the senior manager. The preamble that was given to you by CIMA that talks about the role that you're playing in this exam, funding and sourcing funding and finance was one of the key specific overarching parts of your role. So again, it's important that that is brought in. And likely issues that could arise could be for an add-on issue. As I've said, that's the most likely context of it, rather than it being a huge separate individual question just focusing on funding. And that will likely to be to cover short-term working capital issues. For example, the cash in the bank is far lower than the trade payables that are currently present on the statement of financial position. Also, we've got 12,000 staff that are going to need salaries paid, and our cash flow might be quite sporadic. In a sense, it's not a case of we've got X amount of people paying X amount of money per month for a subscription, so we know we're going to roughly get this amount of money every single month. We have large projects that might take months, if not years, to complete, and we may get the money up front, we may get part of it up front, we may get some of it month by month, we may not get some of it till the very end, or some projects we might not even get any of it until the very end. So the cash flow in is quite sporadic, whereas things like salaries have to be paid month on month. So the short-term working capital we may need extra money to cover short-term working capital requirements. Or it could also be for a large long-term funding requirement, such as any kind of new project, opening up a new factory, putting more into the research and development, acquiring another business, for example. All of these will require large amounts of funding. And some key points to raise: that if we look at the statements provided for us in the pre-scene, they had $167 million Teslan dollars in the bank. Now, that may sound a lot. If you think about that in the same way as you might think about pounds or dollars, you might think, well, I'd like to have 167 million pounds. Okay, yes, but for an organization that has billions in assets, where huge projects cost millions, etc., that's not that much money. If you think about the balance sheets, the assets that they had, just the fixed assets alone, were over 8 billion. That's how much it costs to have these warehouses to produce and the machines to produce the products that we produce. That's how much it costs to have the factories, how much it costs to have the warehouses, how much the inventory actually costs, etc. It's very, very expensive. That 167 million is not going to go very far, particularly given that some of that might be needed for salaries, particularly given that some of that might be needed to pay off the trade payables. Trade payables already nearly 2 billion. So we can't pay off the trade payables with the cash alone. So a lot of that 167 million is not even going to be usable. And what is left might be needed to be kept as part of a financial strategy to have a little bit of money as a buffer planned. But it's certainly not going to be able to fund any large-scale expansion, to fund a new factory, for example, to fund a new R&D division. So a lot more extra funding might be needed for us to expand, to go into new areas, to implement new projects. So some other points here as well, that if we were to look at raising additional debt funding, is that debt funding is currently very high. Gearing rate being 96.04 or 48.99%, depending on which method you use. So whether it's long-term debt over equity or long-term debt over long-term debt plus equity. Now, there's no right or wrong answer, no right or wrong method to use there, as long as you explain which one you've used and you've used the same one each time. Because you don't want to be comparing the two different methods to compare Robobryce and Pavrobot, or the two different years, etc. But they do have money in terms of, well, they do have assets on the balance sheet which can be used as security as well to raise additional debt. And relevant theories to talk about here when you are speaking about debt or equity funding is to think about the power, to think about where they would be, those lenders, those equity providers on your Mendelow's matrix. Lenders often in the keep satisfied, they're not too interested in what's going on at your business, but they do have a lot of power to impact your strategy, particularly if you owe them a lot of money, and we do owe a lot in debt already. And for equity providers, if they are large equity providers, large institutional shareholders, they may even be key players. And then when you think about the advantages of debt versus equity, you can think about the key advantages and disadvantages of each of those, which are quite standard from the syllabus, such as debt being quite a low cost. It's quick access to new funds, but then of course you have to pay it back. Whereas with equity, it's expensive to raise additional equity funding, but there's no absolute need to pay the money back, because you can have dividends, but dividends are actually optional, and we're already paying fairly low dividend rates as it is.
Our final clip is from our mini mock debrief video. We produce a range of mock exams for each sitting, and alongside each of those mocks is a video debrief. And in these debrief videos, our experienced SCS tutor analyzes every question and takes you through a step-by-step guide on the best way to approach them. And by watching debrief videos, you'll learn to understand how to pick out all of the key information in the task and the requirements. You'll use that information to build an effective plan. Many students fail due to poor answer planning, and then that will help you to formulate an excellent answer. So in our sample video, our SCS tutor will take you through question 1 of the mini mock.
So let's start by taking a look at task 1. Now you'll notice this is a 30-minute question because it's our mini mock and it's half the size, whereas in the actual exam you would have 60 minutes, and in our mock debriefs for our full-size mocks they are all 60 minutes long. And this is very representative of the kinds of questions that you might get. It's often from a conversation, an email, a memo, etc. that has been passed to you, often by a member of the board, usually the Chief Financial Officer. And so what we're going to do is approach this question how I would approach this question, using our approach to planning, and then take a look at some key points that we would bring up. So the first thing that I always suggest to students is to look at the requirement lines. Before you look at anything else whatsoever, look at the requirement lines to the question. Now this is useful for two things. A, because in the CIMA exam it will give you a breakdown of the time and thus the marks allocated to each question. So for example, we see here we've got subtask A, which is worth 60%, and we've got subtask B, which is worth 40%. Now, if they hadn't given this, you might just assume they were 50-50, or if you just didn't factor that into your timings or factor that into your marks, you might just take it as 50-50. But it's important because 60% of the marks for this question come from subtask A, 40% come from subtask B. If you treat them as 50-50, you are spending too much time writing too much for subtask B. You're never going to get any more marks than 40% of the marks available, and you're not writing enough for subtask A. Now, this is a half-size question, so if we think about the marks usually allocated to a full-size question being around 33, 34, this is half-size, so we'll take that as, say, 17 marks. 60% are for subtask A, and 40% is for subtask B. So that roughly works out at around about 10 marks for task A and 7 marks for subtask B. So just illustrating there why it is important to use those percentages, because if we'd just say taken it as 8 marks for each of them, we'd write too much for subtask B and not enough for subtask A. But another reason why it's important to look at the requirement lines first is because they then narrow down what you are looking for. You know what you are supposed to do in this question. And that means when you look at the reference material, when you look at the rest of the question, etc., you are then focused on answering the specific task that has been given. And sometimes you'll also need to get an idea of this, then you can then factor it into the rest of your analysis of the question, because sometimes it's quite broad. So we can see this is quite straightforward, but also doesn't tell us exactly what we need to do. Subtask A says an evaluation of the viability of this proposed project for Robobryce on the assumption that we use our usual cost of capital of 8%. So again, at this point, we have no idea what this proposed project is. But if we were to just look at the question, look at the unseen, and just read it through word by word, and just think, oh, well, this could mean this could mean that. If we get a question about this, it will mean A, B, C. If we get a question about that, it will be X, Y, Z. But we don't know what we're looking for at that point. That's why it's always good to read the requirement line first to narrow down what is you're looking for. And now when we look at the reference material, we look at the unseen, we can look at it from the perspective of what's this proposed project, what are we doing with regards to analysing its viability. So with that in mind, let's now take a look at the question. The board has identified potential opportunities to set up an engineering and logistics college that will provide training and offer apprenticeships in fields such as inventory, storage and warehouse management, and also offer mechanical, electrical and software engineering training. So this essentially is basically looking at setting up a college that's going to train people, offer apprenticeships in the fields that we operate in as Robobryce. We are experts in inventory and storage management, and we also have plenty of mechanical, electrical, and software engineering people within our organization. So instantly we should be thinking about, well, it's almost like an employee pipeline. This would be really great for us to ensure that we've got the right number of people with the right level of training coming through this college, offering them positions within our company. Staffing was mentioned as one of the big key issues within the pre-scene. It was one that it spoke repeatedly about the idea of staffing, the idea of the need for staff. It was mentioned in the risk reports, etc., and need for staff with the right level of skills. And if we want to grow, if we want to expand, we will need more people trained in mechanical, electrical, and software engineering. We have 900 at the moment, but if the market for AMRs, for example, is going to grow 400% in the next 6 years, then we might need more people with those skills within our organization. So when we're talking about the viability, we're talking about evaluating that viability, the benefits of this project for Robobryce, we're already thinking about recruitment benefits here. However, it's a completely different thing, completely different project, completely different industry than we have worked in before. Yes, we are experts in inventory, storage, we have mechanical, electrical, and software engineers, etc. But there is a huge difference between opening and offering training courses in these subjects versus just working within the industry. So it's both a new service, something we've not done before, and it will also be marketing at an entirely different market as well, as people coming out of university, coming out of school, wanting training, wanting skills. So it's a very high risk strategy as well. We don't have perhaps the necessary skills and experience in this industry at the moment. There might be plenty of other colleges, for example, that are already offering these, and we're now opening ourselves up to further competition in a new market with a new service in a high risk industry. So again, that's the cross reference to this viability. This would be a negative side of it where it may not be viable. And the likely location of this school will be in the central Tesland city due to its population size and the proximity to a number of our clients and our Tesland sites. So it's in the right location for us. We can offer the apprenticeships within our actual factories as well, within our clients' factories as well, because of course we deal both in our own factories and also clients' warehouses where we're setting up our different projects such as the shelving, such as the AGVs, the AMRs, warehouse management systems, etc. And this is in response to a report from the newly created Industry Insight Unit. Please see the attached report along with a forecast cost for this project. So we'll then take a look at the reference material. And it's very important, another note here, that when you have been provided reference material in the exam, that you are expected to use it. They've given it to you for a reason. They expect you to reference it within your answers. So here's the report extract. A key finding was the increasing demand for employees in the logistics industry and how demand will outstrip supply by 2032, particularly in areas such as inventory and storage management, engineering, AGV operators, and warehouse floor management. So again, lots of need for this college. We know from this Industry Insight report, or at least we're assuming from this Industry Insight report, that areas such as inventory management, engineering, operating AGVs, AMRs, etc., the demand for people within this role is going to outstrip the supply, meaning that there's going to be more need for people than there is people available. Now, one of the key issues for the pre-scene was the level of staffing, was the level of skills that the staff had. A lot of people was very labor-intensive warehouse jobs. So you've got a lot of people, potential candidates, to be retrained in areas such as these. So we know there is a lot of people that will be potentially available to attend our college to learn these skills, etc. But if we don't have further training in these areas, we know that the actual demand is going to outstrip supply, and that is going to cause problems, bottlenecks within the industry. So that's another reason why there's the chance that it will be successful, why it will be useful for us. And in order to meet its unemployment target, the government has actually announced a subsidy program for any organization offering training and apprenticeships in these sorts of industries. So there might be additional government subsidies, government funding for us to set up this program, which of course will cut down the costs from our side and also will buy us some goodwill perhaps with the government. Another thing that is useful just on that note is goodwill with the public, goodwill with the society, goodwill with the environment around us. Now, mentioned in the pre-scene that one of our values and our mission, our vision, etc., was all about societal well-being, to be for the benefit of society. So if we're offering opportunities, training, development opportunities for people who are unemployed, for people in the local area to upskill, to get new jobs, etc., then that is having a positive impact on society. And it would also be perhaps considered a CSR project as well, where we're doing something for the benefit of society. And that was also something that was in the pre-scene, or wasn't in the pre-scene, was CSR projects. Despite being a company that claims it's all about societal well-being, there wasn't actually any mention of anything that they do for society as a whole other than their current operations. The Insight report also goes on to suggest that options for graduates and unemployed citizens is limited, particularly in areas such as logistics, being on the job. So, of course, when you've already got a job in it, you learn how to do it then. Higher education institutions like universities are also not necessarily helping due to focus on less practical academic courses that do not prepare people for the job market. So, again, one of the roles that we play as a senior manager working in the finance function at Robobryce is also to suggest options. So when you see this, what you might also be thinking of, rather than just analyzing the viability of this project and this proposed project, is what alternative options could you have? So we've been given information here that says that universities are offering these courses, but they're less practical. So rather than maybe having our own college, could we partner with a university to provide more practical elements to it, or perhaps placements as part of the course, etc.? That's an alternative option to this strategy here that ultimately achieves the same sort of aim. So we recommend starting a small to medium scale college, educating attendees in the above areas and providing them with placement and job opportunities upon and during completion. So that's their recommendation, and they've got the proposed project here, the analysed proposed project, looking at the costs involved. It's got a net present value here. And what we can see is that over the first 3 years, it essentially requires 80 million Teston dollars in investment. And actually for a few years it's going to be loss making. For example, in the first year 67 million loss, second year 63 million loss, 20 mil profit in the third year. So one thing that we need to think about here is, do we have the cash? Now we have 167 million Teston dollars in the bank, and that already is not going to be enough for at least the whole project. It's 240 million. It might be enough for the first year, year zero, etc., but it's not enough for the whole thing as a whole. Now, of course, we will get profit from the business, from Robobryce, that can be reinvested into it, but essentially we don't have enough cash to fund this project at the moment, which may mean additional debt funding would be required. We already have quite a lot in borrowings, 11 billion. We're already paying quite a lot in finance costs, so our gearing rate is already quite high, almost 50%. So that may make large-scale debt funding prohibitive, but of course we do have some cash. We can part fund it with cash. We part fund it with profits from next year, etc., for year one, year two, and that of course will then reduce the amount we need to take out in debt. So it might be comparatively only a small level of debt that we need to take out. Now, of course, it's better than equity funding because that's usually used for massive, large projects, ones where we'd be looking to raise hundreds and hundreds of millions, if not billions of Teston dollars in one go. So the time and cost involved in doing that would not be necessary for a project such as this. You can also see that it does have a positive net present value, 78 million Teston dollars, meaning that in theory we should take the project because it provides a return to shareholders greater than the expected return. But the problem that we have here is that we are using that 8% discount factor as the usual cost of capital. Now that's fine when we are undertaking projects similar to the projects that we always undertake. If we're undertaking new projects with regards to new installations, with regards to new designs of robots, etc., that we've been designing, or new expansions of factories, expansions of warehouses, etc., things that are the bread and butter of Robobryce on a day-to-day basis, that might be fair. But of course, this is completely different. This is high risk. It's a new service, it's a new market. So that discount factor may not be acceptable because it doesn't take into account the higher risk posed by taking on a project that is not our usual remit, is not our usual operations. So it could be that based on these figures that in theory it's acceptable to our shareholders and they will want it, but we might be better off, be prudent to recalculate it on a higher rate in order to ensure that it's still positive with that higher rate to take into account the higher level of risk involved. So that brings us on to the second subtask, subtask B, which is actually just a follow on from this. And what you'll have seen throughout this video so far, throughout our analysis, is we've been looking at whether it's a suitable project based on our needs, based on our requirements, whether it's acceptable to our shareholders, whether it's feasible because of the finances involved. So actually, what we've done is we've already started to create a suitability, acceptability, feasibility model analysis here. And that's how I would recommend you structure your answer. That's always one of the best models to use to structure your answers because it naturally gives you jumping off points. If we'd have thought that at the start, if we'd have just assumed that at the start, we'd already be answering a lot of the points in our analysis before we'd even looked at the rest of it. We'd already be thinking about shareholders, we'd already be thinking about funding. We wouldn't have even needed to have gone through in detail the rest of the script to have picked up those points. So it's really useful to use that tool, and I recommend that whenever you see a project, you should instantly be thinking about the suitability, acceptability, feasibility model. And so in the next part, where we're looking at the recommendation for moving this project forward, how I would suggest this is making a recommendation. I would suggest, yes, we do, but with a higher cost of capital, making sure that we've got a higher cost of capital to be used to justify the extra risk. We then include our justifications. Now, justifications are essentially why the positives or why the reasons to undertake the project outweigh the reasons to not undertake the project. Now, if you fall on a different side of that, if you fall on the side of the negatives, the reasons not to take the project outweigh the positives, that's fine as well. There is no right or wrong answer to this question. You can say yes, we should, you can say no, we shouldn't. And the examiner, the marker, will have a mark scheme built around that as well. So you do not have to make specific points. You do not have to agree yes or no. You can say no for completely different reasons than someone else says no. You can say yes for completely different reasons than another person says yes. And they will still all be valid answers, provided that it in turn is a valid answer, that it is a reasonable point to have brought up. So justifications could be, well, we know that there is demand for it. We know that the Insight unit, its job is to basically find recommendations for growth, has recommended it. We know that the demand for staff is going to outstrip supply. We know that it will be beneficial for us for a recruitment perspective. We know that there is a risk for our business. And we know that there is also government subsidies as well that may make it the perfect time to enter the market. And then you have your actions. Actions are gold dust for students in the CIMA exam because they are things that are really, really generic and easy to write, but they can appear incredibly applied and they can be used in a lot of different places and they can be very, very generic as well. So it's really useful to put in action points. Action points are things that's basically about how you're going to take this project forward. So you're very much thinking like a senior manager when you're taking the project forward. It's middle and lower level managers and operational staff that just say yes or no, or that just do things. A senior manager takes the project forward. How we're going to actually take this idea and implement it. But it can be very easy. You can say things like, well, we need to agree with the board. We need to decide on the funding that we're going to undertake or how we're going to fund this project. We then need to get a project management team and appoint a project leader. We then need to review the project on completion to see what went well, what didn't go so well, what lessons will we take forward to future projects, or what lessons we can apply to the rest of our company. Again, all of that really, really generic. Didn't mention Robobryce there, didn't mention this project there. Well, we can tweak the answers to reflect that, but ultimately, what I've just said there, that list of things could be applied almost anywhere. And yet it would appear really applied, really, really senior, really strategic. So that's why they're really useful for your exam.
So there we have it, 5 key videos to get you started with your exam preparation. I hope you found them useful, but the reality is that this is just the starting point, and you'll need to do a lot more preparation over the next few weeks to improve your chances of passing this tricky exam. And to that end, we have a number of options available. The video clips you've just seen are taken from our course content. And our courses are designed to help you ultimately pass the exam. We want to minimize your study time. And of course, we want to ensure that you're getting your value for your money. So if you want more of what you saw today, you want to check out our full pre-scene analysis pack. And that basically includes the full videos from which those clips were taken, from the pre-scene analysis videos through to the top 10 analysis, the strategic analysis, industry analysis, and in addition to that, we've also got 30 pre-scene questions that are designed to help you consolidate your knowledge and understanding of the pre-scene company. Pre-scene analysis is a crucial first step, but passing the SCS exam requires developing your exam technique and lots of practice. So the best all-round comprehensive solution is the Astranti Premium SCS course. On that, in addition to everything you get in the pre-scene analysis pack, you'll also get 5 mock exams. And those mock exams are written according to the pre-scene company. They're not generic and they don't have generic solutions. They're applied to the pre-scene and they're based on the top 10 issues. So you'll get questions in the mock exam that they'll have a good chance of coming up in the real exam. In addition to those mock exams, you can get mock marking and feedback. And this is where you'll submit a mock exam to your dedicated marker and they will mark that and give you a fully annotated script with feedback and annotations. And they also provide a 9-page document with feedback that you can apply in your next mock. In addition to that, we've got our exam technique video series. Exam technique is really important in this exam. And so our exam technique video series has 13 chapter study texts and accompanying videos taking you through every aspect of exam technique, right from understanding the exam through to interpreting the requirements, answer planning, writing technique, and time management. Really valuable course that will help you a lot developing those soft skills that you need to do well in this exam. Alongside that, we have 3 live masterclasses that run throughout the course, from the first one that's looking at the pre-scene through to later ones that look more at exam technique and theory revision to help you get ready. Included in the premium, you get access to tutor and mentor support, and you'll be able to access our discussion hub where you can post your questions and talk with other students and tutors about any questions and queries you may have. And our premium course comes with our double pass guarantee, and that's exclusive to premium course students. It's a double guarantee because if you don't pass, if you take this course and you don't pass the exam, we'll give it you again for free with no extra charge. And you also have a 14-day money-back guarantee. So if after 14 days on the course you're not happy, you can get a refund, no questions asked. So whatever your situation, we believe we have the solution for you at Astranti, and you can find out more at astranti.com/CIMA.